And welcome, Hoosier Nation, to our 40th episode of the Hoosier Sound, where our show has one main goal: to give you our perspective of IU sports from the point of view as a student or young adult. In addition, we will also give our view on hot takes from around the world of sports. We are recording this edition on Tuesday evening, June 12th, where I am your host, Noah Freeman, and I'm with my usual co-host, Matthew Lukens. Normally, we'll be going live every Tuesday evening at 8:30 p.m., but if you miss us live, you can check out and subscribe to our various networks and listen on your own time. Check out our Twitter and Facebook at The Hoosier Sound and subscribe. All of the information is in our website, thehoosiersound.com. Lastly, we've said this just a couple times, but we are really looking for your help, and we really need your help. We're looking to update our website, and sadly, that comes at a cost. We are ready to take your experience and our experience to the next level, and we really need your help if at all possible. We want to make the website more friendly, add more features, add different plugins, so it's kind of a more comfortable place for you guys to go. I've already got a beta version basically set up that pending some technical difficulties, would be ready to go up hopefully next week. But we got a GoFundMe set up, and all we got to do is raise just $60. So if at all possible, even a $5, just a couple dollar donation really, really goes a long way. Thank you guys so much in advance. The link is in our website or the description below. All right, Hoosier Nation, it is time for some sports talk. First, before we get into our main topic, and we only got one big topic today, basically, we've got some updates that have kind of happened throughout this past week with mostly IU basketball, but I thought they'd be worth mentioning. Just some small things. The Indiana-Kentucky AllStar Game happened, where Indiana usually leads the series, but Kentucky won this game 100-89. The Indiana seniors versus juniors game, the seniors won 111-101. Obviously, we had a few recruits coming in that played in both of those games. We had the rookies that are reporting to camp today. Jake Forrester actually came yesterday, and we got Archie Miller's father-son basketball camp coming up on Friday and Saturday. So a lot actually going on in this slow off season. But Matt, what are your opening thoughts and opening comments with everything that's going on in the past week or so?
Well, I think it's very exciting, especially with everybody coming to school or things being figured out. I think it's going to be more exciting when we find out the full breadth of what the non-conference schedule is going to be for IU basketball. So that should be in the next couple weeks here. And then also we should be hearing back on some recruitments probably coming in the next, I'd say months or so.
Yeah.
But I mean, this for a slow period, in quotation marks, slow period, I feel like it's been a lot of news and pretty steady for us. So that's great. And plenty to talk about.
Of course. And of course, did you get to see any of the All-Star games, either one of them over the past weekend, or hear anything about them?
Yeah, I was watching a bit here and there, trying to see if there was anybody with like a Facebook live stream, because it was really hard to find anything. But I got to see a little bit of the game that they lost to Kentucky. That is, the Indiana All-Stars lost to Kentucky. That was a really bad game, but they had some pretty good performances of IU players. I think Kentucky played out of their minds that night and just got the better of them. And then I didn't get to see live at Bankers Life the next night, but I did get to see some of the highlights thanks to Frankie Vision, who always puts out highlights. So it was fun to see, Romeo and the other guys, Demise and God, why is his name escaping me right now? Phinisee, Rob. I got to see them play a bit, though. I think it's going to be good for them to get back in the gym and to work on their shots and stuff, because they've had a long season, and they just graduated a couple weeks ago. So I think it's time for them to not just take a break, but kind of take a factory reset and go back and chill out for a bit.
And especially with the Kentucky game, I know a lot of people are a little worried that Indiana lost, because they usually shouldn't, especially with the class that they've got coming in. But don't take too much stock from that. They don't get to play together ever. like you said, people are graduating. They don't really get to practice together. Some people,
Right.
even like Romeo, are in multiple games, and maybe it's just a fun game. Sure, they've got state pride, but it's just a fun game. There's not too much stake to put into it that, especially these three recruits couldn't get a win just over a one-time deal, basically. So, and if anything, actually, to take away, I know Demezi and Rob made comments actually about Romeo over the course of the games, where he basically just at some points, especially in the junior-senior game, where again you'd think that the seniors would win pretty easily, but no, the juniors actually gave him a tough time, and Romeo kind of took the ball and just said, "Nope, enough is enough," and he kind of just took over for the seniors, more or less, and which is promising for next year, that he can be that guy that we might need to just go and get 2 points just to stop an opposing run or something like that. But just some quick thoughts. Archie's camp coming up this weekend. That's always a cool thing to see, and then he'll get into his team camps, which is a really cool thing with just recruiting, honestly, with folks coming in over the summer. But let's get into the bulk of this topic. Matt and I had an idea of for a mini series basically over the summer when things are a little slow, that we kind of go talk about each class more or less, and we'd start with the outgoing seniors. Start with them, then go down to the senior class, juniors, sophomores, freshmen, kind of thing. Just looking at both football and basketball, seeing where they're at after really finalizing more of the rosters, going through camps, spring camp for football, both the basketball teams getting on campus, just like the freshmen got there today. So we thought it'd be cool just to really look through basically an in-depth over the course of the summer, an in-depth look on both football and basketball by class. But let's start with we're going to start with the outgoing seniors, like I just said. So we're going to start with how to replace these outgoing seniors, and we're going to include, for football at least, we're going to include Simi Cobbs just because he left early, obviously, to go to the NFL. But let's start with, and I'm going to go group by group. So let's start with how to replace the linebacking crew that went out, and this is a bit of a big hole, big shoes to fill, with Chris Covington and T. Gray Scales leaving. So Matt, what are your thoughts on how we can replace those two pivotal players, honestly, for this entire team, not just the defense?
It's going to have to be by committee. I don't think there's going to be one player that's going to be able to be like, yeah, I'm just going to take up T. Gray's role and just play as well as he did last year. Right, we're a young team on defense. A lot of our players are freshmen or sophomores or redshirt juniors, like
very, very young.
Yeah, very, very young on defense. So if something is going to happen, it's going to be because there's a bunch of people that step up, and it's not just going to be one person. And I think that goes for a lot of the positions in football, especially since, with the transition from Coach Wilson to now Coach Allen, I think we've gotten a lot younger, which is great for the future, but for the present, right, when we're trying to win games, it's gonna take some time for those people to get used to, I'm the star guy or I'm the next one up. So if anything's gonna happen, it's gonna be because as a committee, as a linebacking core, they got their stuff together and were able to pull through and make us not forget, but to lessen the blow of losing people like T. Gray and Covington. So, yeah.
And basically for most of the defense, honestly, I think it's mostly the defense that this is most relevant for. You kind of got your starters that are juniors or seniors, just like the very first line, the first 11 people that might go out right away. But then really right after that, it drops significantly down to mostly freshmen, a few sophomores, which if you look at it, that's when Tom Allen came in, especially with the defense, when he came in as a defensive coordinator, then his second year as head coach. So really they're young guys, but they're more of Tom Allen's guys. So we'll get to see where those few veteran players get to mix and match with those freshmen. But specifically for linebacking, because replacing Chris and T. Gray, it's the linebacking crew is definitely going to take a step back. But the people that are going to have to step up and form that committee that Matt mentioned is really Michael McGinnis and Raquan Jones Jr. and kind of Damian Willis Jr. They're really those upperclassmen. Then, like I just said, you've got a bunch of freshmen that come right under them and a couple sophomores. This spot really is next to the D line. This spot is really the group that's going to hurt the most, especially after the past couple of years. You've had guys like Marcus Oliver and then obviously T. Gray and Chris the past couple of years. This group is really going to take a step back, but you can try and compensate with kind of the DBs, which we're going to get into next. So outgoing DBs, and we're just going to mesh groups. So we're going to mesh cornerback, safeties, the Husky position, that kind of stuff. DBs, Rashard Fant, Tony Fields, Chase Dutra, Jamie Thompson, and Ben Bach were the seniors that left. And this is, I just mentioned the Husky position. So Tom Allen runs more of a weird scheme, which it seems weird.
Yep.
Right now, but it's starting actually to become more of the norm. So he runs a 4-2-5 where you've got less linebackers basically and more secondary people. So obviously to add more secondary people, you have to have less linebackers. So he's got this quote unquote Husky position where it's kind of a safety, but also a guy that can step up and be a linebacker in the most simple terms. So actually, you saw in this past NFL draft, you saw a couple safeties get drafted like that, where they're going to be serving as the role of safety, possibly coming up into the linebacker position. It's kind of like the NBA where it's going to positionless basketball. That's kind of where some of this backfield in football is going, more or less in some schemes, where the linebackers and the DBs are kind of starting to become the same people. But that's really where that's what that Husky position is, where it adds into technically that 5 secondary thing. And if you want a person of who is that position, Marcelino Ball, that is the Husky guy. So whenever you see him on the field, that he is technically under Tom Allen's that position. But to replace those guys, when you replace Rashard Fant, Tony Fields, and even Chase Dutra to some extent, it seems like we lost a lot, and we did, but this is honestly, out of the entire defense, this is the most, it's pretty healthy compared to a lot of the other stuff. You still have people like Jonathan Crawford coming back, and then you got Andre Brown and Ashawn Riggins. They've all seen a significant amount of snaps, that they'll be able to come in and basically come in without a hitch, because especially a lot of these people, a lot of these DBs have gotten injured throughout the entire year with, like we said, Marcelino Ball. We've got like a lot of those quote unquote understudies that have seen time. So these DBs, it's going to be the same kind of thing, committee, but it's kind of just you've got your senior leader that was there, say like Rashard Fant, and then you've got someone like possibly Andre Brown coming in to replace him, with more or less not too much of a hitch between the last year and this year.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think there's going to be that much of a. There's going to be a hole to fill, right? Obviously, those guys were leaders, and some of them were senior leaders on our team. But as far as production goes, I think a lot of those guys can probably step up and do what the Dutras and the Fants did last year. So I'm less worried about that, the secondary, than I am about almost any other position on the football team.
Agreed. We lost talent, but we've got people that can step up, and we've got people under them that have great potential.
A lot of talent and a lot of potential. So yeah, exactly. I'm not worried at all.
But then we'll get into the last defensive group, and it's the D line. We lost Robert McRae III, Greg Gooch, and Nate Hoff. This was a huge blow. Before I get into my stuff, do you want to just talk about how do you think we're going to replace basically these three, pun intended, huge guys?
Right. Yeah. Huge guys is a little bit of an understatement if you ever walked into a defensive lineman. But 3 out of the 4 we lost, which is, I mean, for any Division I program, their defensive line, sorry, not offensive line. Defensive line is obviously going to take a hit the next year. we did have the one grad transfer that came in from, where did he come from? Was it Stanford, Notre Dame, somewhere? We had a grad transfer come in, so he at least has some experience. So then that's 2 of our 4 defensive linemen that are experienced. But I'd put a lot of money on us not having a very good defensive line next year. And it's not because the people aren't very talented, but because we've lost so many people. We lost so many people that played such an important part in our defense last year and were so critical to our defensive success last year, and who played a majority of the minutes last year. So when you combine the fact that both they were important and they played a lot of minutes, which means that other people didn't really get to, get game experience, I think we're going to be worse off than we are at the linebacker position, and we were losing 2 of our best 3 defensive players at the linebacker position. That's how bad I think our defensive line next year is going to be. And it's nothing against the fact that they're not good Division I football players. It's that whoever we're plugging into that position I don't think has enough experience combined to fill in what is needed at that position.
Yeah, and specifically to who is going to replace them, basically, because it's going to be hard to replace those people, especially that are going to have to step up. Niles Skykes, he's one of the big guys. He was supposed to have kind of a JaJuan Morgan breakout junior year last year, but he was sidelined with basically a season-ending injury, so he really didn't get to play at all last night. So hopefully he has that breakout year, and he's going to be able to step up and become one of those 3 guys that we lost. So hopefully he can plug into at least one of those 3. And then we've really got to also rely on Jacob Robinson. He was already one of IU's best linemen and best defensive leaders. He's really going to have to step up even more than what he was already doing to try and come in there. He had a lot of tackles last year, he was really pushing into the backfield. Those 2 guys are going to be the main anchors on this defensive line that you'll see a lot of snaps going to. Then you've got Stallings and Bowen. Those are 2 seasoned veterans that more or less might get the starting nod with depending on what formation we've got out there, along with Skykes and Robinson. But those are basically literally those 4 guys are the only ones that are juniors, and then mostly seniors. After them, again, like we said, it's a very, very, very young group. So maybe that's motivation for these freshmen and then sophomores basically to come up and take some of these roles and maybe come up into the position that McRae, Gooch, and Hoff left. But this is going to be a key position to watch throughout the entire season next year. And IU is really going to need a lot of young players to step up. That's probably the biggest position that we're going to have to rely on young talent, which is not something you necessarily want in a football team. Right. All right, let's go to the offensive line, or just the offensive side of the ball. We're going to wait to talk about QB to the very end because we had a Twitter question come in about QB. But let's go to the rest of the offense, which is just one player basically on basically every position. So it's more or less the offensive side of the ball is looking pretty good compared to last year. So let's start with the O-line. All we had was Danny Friend leave. He really didn't play last year. The O-line is going to be a lot better because obviously we had some O-line issues to say the least last year. Yes. But they've got experience. They've now had another year. It's kind of like basketball. They've got another year under their system. They're able to know the schemes better. The running backs are staying basically the same. So I really expect, and I think the O-line is going to step up and be much better. They're probably not going to be like the O-line was a couple years ago, especially with Phinisee anchoring it. But no. I think it'll be competent, and they'll be enough to hold the offense to where they can still do something, especially where they added the O-line added a grad transfer with Nick Linder as well.
Yeah, I think our offensive line is going to be much improved, and we have some depth now, which is great. It's always good to have depth, especially in football, because by the end of the year, you're playing a lot of second team or your second choice guys by the end of the year just because of injuries. What happens, right? Good programs have depth. I think we're starting to see that with our offensive line.
Yeah, we lost one person that doesn't play and got a bunch of young people that'll be able to come in and add depth.
Yep. So that's about it on the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. All right, Ian Thomas on the tight end. Obviously, huge blow. The highest IU grad that was drafted in the NFL draft, but
highest pick. Yep.
Yeah, the highest pick. So to replace him, Ryan Watercutter, he wasn't too bad when Ian was injured on and off last season. He was the guy that kind of went in and got most of the tight end snaps and catches when Ian wasn't there. You've got Austin Doris under that. Then you've also got a redshirt freshman in Peyton Hendershot. Those three are basically the ones that are going to be fighting for a tight end. It's kind of a wide open position to get this spot. I would assume Watercutter is probably going to get most of the snaps, but apparently Peyton Hendershot is supposed to be a guy that's was highly touted in high school, so he could be an up and coming guy that we just haven't seen yet. Especially taking a red shirt here, that also helps a lot.
Yes, I did know that about Hendershot, that when he was being recruited to IU, people were comparing him to what Ian Thomas was. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see him get some surprise snaps. Haha, I used surprise twice. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him more often than we're expecting, just because the talent's there. He's just got to get game time. But, yeah, if I had to put my money somewhere, it's going to be Watercutter that's going to get most of the snaps. And he was very decent and obviously got time to play and some very good game time to play when Ian Thomas was out with his injury. So he's experienced. He's done this before. He's next in line. Let's give him a shot. And then if that doesn't work out as well as it did last year, then let's give the freshman a shot.
And don't forget Austin Doris. He's seen time too, so he might be able to come up in. But let's go to the next position, which I don't know about you, but I had to do some research for. We lost our 4-year starter with Griffin Oaks in the kicker, and that's an important position. We saw a bunch of games, especially Griffin's junior year, where that was his outlier year, where he was just so much worse compared to his other 3 years that you really need a kicker. So I've got two people coming in that are gonna fight for the job. Looking at it, Jared Smoller he's a redshirt sophomore. He was originally from Rutgers University, and he grew up in Valparaiso, Indiana. So in 2016, that was when he first went to Rutgers, and he saw the field in 3 games where he totaled 21 kickoff attempts and averaged 55.1 yards per kickoff. But that was all he did during that season. I assume Rutgers, probably because there are not a lot of kicker stats out there, folks, guys. I really looked. I assume that Rutgers had a good kicker, and Smoller was just getting some reps, because you know how Penn State especially is known for you got a guy doing the kickoffs, you got a guy doing the field goals, you got a guy they work like 3 or 4 different kickers. So I assume that was his role, just to literally get out on the field and kick the ball. But he averaged 55.1 yards per kickoff, 21 kickoff attempts in 3 games. All he did. Redshirted in 2017, and now since he's been there, he's had time off. He's basically, at least he's got a leg up on the incoming freshman I'll talk about in a second to be Indiana's main kicker, and I would assume would at least start at the beginning of the season, because the freshman kicker hasn't even been on campus yet. But Smoller was the number 7th ranked kicker coming into college, and he was also the number 12th ranked punter, and it was rated as a 5-star kicking recruit. So he was pretty highly touted coming out of high school. Senior year, he connected 8 field goals with a long of 52 yards, which is really good in high school. And he made every single extra point. He had 36 extra points, and he made every single one of them. Even Griffin Oaks missed a couple, which obviously bigger stage, but he still made every single extra point. Then you've got Charles Campbell, which is an Army All-American, ranked the number 9 ranked kicker coming in this summer, who is also going to compete for the starting role. From what I've heard, it's an open position. Neither player really has it locked down. In my opinion, I think Smoller will, just because he's more experienced, will at least start out. But I think they're both going to really push each other for that starting role.
Actually, I'm not sure. I think the freshman's got a shot. I've seen him kick. I watched the Army All-American game, Under Armour All-American game, which is so hard to say, but yeah, I watched that, and he was kicking in there, and he did pretty well. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets the position. So.
Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. I think he's got a chance. I just think Jared at least will start out the season that way, just because.
Right. And if he doesn't, let's say Smolder doesn't get kicking duty for extra points and field goals, with his experience, he might still get kickoffs. So yep. I feel like
he actually, in one of those games, those kickoffs that he attempted, I think it was 8 that he had when they played Washington, which was at the time ranked number 14 in the nation. So they actually they still had they still trusted him even just to do kickoff. So he's his very little college experience. He has at least done something. He hasn't done nothing basically.
He's done something. Yes,
he's done something. All right, let's finish up football real quick because we've been on football for a bit. Penix Jr. I think it's pretty straightforward, honestly, for the wide receivers. We've got a lot of depth. We saw a couple freshmen start to break out last year. We're going to get JaJuan Harris back. We still have Nick Westbrook. Luke Timian was getting.
We got Nick Westbrook back too while we're at it, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. But at the end of the season, Luke Timian got a lot of snaps last year and was becoming a really what's the word I'm looking for? He was becoming a guy that they could really rely on for if they really needed a first down or a 5-yard catch or something. They like to throw to Luke's way. But Wap Fillier came out last night and even got someone like Donovan Hill coming up. Yep, Wap. So I think obviously Simi was huge last year. Words cannot describe how many catches and how many game changer things he had. But I think the wide receiver depth is pretty good.
Yeah, and I'm not worried about the wide receiver position at all. I think Nick Westbrook will come back because we were expecting the 1-2 punch of Nick Westbrook and Simi Cobbs last year to be the next greatest thing since sliced bread. And then right before the season, Nick Westbrook gets, an awful injury. And so we don't even get to see what that would have been like. And I just wanted one game to see
Even Simi the year before getting suspended, we never, ever got to see those two together.
No, never got to see those two play together, and they would have been so good together. Like, just toss it up to, like, either one, whoever's got the smaller DB on them, and then it's, like, an easy 10 yards. But that's just – it's one of those IU what-ifs. It's also, like, what if they called that field goal and the Pinstripe Bowl in and not out? The great what ifs of IU football. And also, what if IU football wasn't the worst Division I program? But anyways, that's another what if. But no, definitely. The IU wide receiver position a lot better. I think we're gonna have a lot more depth this year because with the injury to Westbrook, we got a lot more people game time last year.
Yeah,
we only lost Simi.
And if you want to talk about replacements, Nick Westbrook's just more or less going to be replacing Simi, so it's going to be the same thing.
Exactly.
Let's go into basketball though. We can kind of do this more as a group because obviously there are less compared to football, but it was still a big class. Replacing Tim Priller, I think the students will decide who to replace Tim Priller with. Maybe
it'll probably be Johnny Yeager. If I had to venture to guess, it'd be Johnny. But
probably. But let's get into let's just do the guards as a whole, and let's do Josh Newkirk and Rob Johnson. We'll do those as a whole. And yes, we will. Josh did have some good things that can be replaced. But let's talk about Josh and Rob. How do you think? Those two seniors are their minutes, their points, their assists, how is all of that going to be replaced with this next coming group?
I think if we're going to go off the beginning of the season last year, which was we had Josh was the starting point guard. was trying to say, I got him and Rob Phinisee mixed up now.
Oh my goodness.
I'm trying to formulate a thought in my head, and it's so hard. But anyways, Josh Newkirk was the starting point guard at the start of last year. I think our starting point guard this year is going to be Devontae Green. So Devontae will then replace Josh Newkirk, and it's not going to be that hard to replace him. Now, can Rob Phinisee come in and replace what Devontae did last year? That remains to be seen. But I think if we're looking at, okay, we lost Josh Newkirk and we replaced him with starting Devontae Green and then bringing in as backup why do I keep Rob Phinisee?
Man.
I know. I don't know what's going on. I'm sick. I'm sorry, guys.
Anyway, I don't think we should ever have Rob Phinisee on here if you can't remember.
Right. No, Rob's going to be like, you don't even know my name. Anyways, but replacing Devontae's minutes with Rob Phinisee's minutes, I think overall we've improved that point guard position as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And I think Devontae, especially with Archie's comments with Devontae over the at Huber's about what Devontae's been doing in the spring and into early summer, I think replacing Josh Newkirk, just take all of his good parts and add that to Devontae Green just getting better. I think Devontae just as a whole is going to get better. But then next, let's talk about obviously the biggest replacement out of this entire team, Rojo.
I think it's an improvement. And that's no disrespect to Rojo, who's going to probably be a G League and NBA player. He'll be probably one of those two-way guys just because he's a very good defender one-on-one, and he's also a decent three-point shooter when he's not having to create his own shot. That being said, last year he had to create his own shot. He's not a guy who's going to be able to, one dribble, crossover, pull up. That's not his game.
He thrived the most when Yogi was able to pass him the ball.
Correct. He's an off the ball player. He was never going to be. He could be a star, but he has to be off the ball. He can't have the ball in his hands and then try to create himself. We are replacing him with somebody who can be the star off the ball, and then also all right, we got 5 seconds left in the shot clock. Who are we passing it to on the perimeter to make a shot? Last year it was Devontae Green. Love Devontae, but this year Devontae gets to pass to Romeo, and that's Romeo's main gift, which is shot creation. He's going to make and take hard shots, especially at the end of the shot clock. So I think we've replaced that position very well.
And I think the only other part that Romeo won't be able to replace Rojo with is leadership, and I think that goes straight away now to JaJuan Morgan and even Zach McRoberts, honestly, to some extent. I think those guys are going to take a lot of that senior role, because I think Rojo off the court did start to get into some sort of leadership role, even more than his junior year. It wasn't as much of a vocal leader as you might see with as someone like Thomas Bryant or something like that.
Right. It's not going to be. It wasn't visible to us fans, but I think it was more internal. The guys hanging out in and around their apartments and houses, and just Rojo was the first guy in and out of gym and shooting around. And I think that'll be replaced, obviously, by, you said, JaJuan Morgan and Zach McRoberts. But I think also it would be good if that was also replaced by Devontae Green. And I think we had a leader at the point guard position. I think Devontae can kind of step up into that role and be like, look, guys, I'm the guard who's been here the longest. I've been through it all. I've been up against the ropes. Archie's chewed me out 1 or 5 or 17 times during the middle of games. But I know what it's like to mess up, and I also know what it's like to mess up and get better. So I think IU basketball as a whole is better suited if Devontae becomes a on-the-court leader and off-the-court leader.
Yeah, I think in simple terms, we could have a whole podcast on this, folks. We do want to go more in depth, but I know we're running up against the clock. In simple terms, I think it's honestly a lot easier to replace Rojo, and that just speaks words to not just as a detriment to Rob, but I think as a good thing for the team in general, that we've got players that are going to be able to step up and replace the important role that he did. Obviously, it wasn't as consistent as we always wanted last year, but I think it's a good thing that we've got people to replace him with.
Yeah, I think that's the main point, is that Rob was a great player at times. We had the Iowa game where he just went off, right? And I think that when we look back on it will be, what do we remember from Rojo's senior season? It's going to be that game at Iowa where he hit 9 threes, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't have to create all those shots. A lot of those were catch and shoot, opportunities, just because we had Devontae wheeling and dealing that game. But I think we replace inconsistency with, at least we know what we're going to get from Romeo every night, which is going to be, 15 or 16, 17 points. He's going to take some dumb shots that some people are like, why is he going to take? And then he's going to make some of those, and you're going to be like, you should take more of those. So that's exactly what we're going to get from Romeo.
Yeah. Let's go quickly through the last couple of people so we can get to the Twitter question. But Colin Hartman, sadly, he was just injured, and a guy that just didn't have the kind of second senior year that he wanted. I don't think there's too much to replace besides quote unquote. We're doing all of this in very layman's terms, just very simple terms, because obviously we could go a lot more in depth with what they did, and Colin meant a lot more than what we're going to just generalize this to. But in terms of his senior season, there's not going to be too much to replace besides talked about that I think people are going to step up into that role. You mostly played the 3 position. We've got a bunch of people that are fighting for that spot. So I don't think Colin Hartman is going to be too much. Is going to be too hard to replace all of the good things he did.
Right. I like off the court, I think Colin Hartman's going to be hard to replace. On the court, however, I think he was already replaced last year by Zach McRoberts.
And sadly, it was a lot of his injury, which it's just the way it worked.
Right. And then this year, his minutes will probably go to somebody like Jerome Hunter.
Yeah.
I think would take his minutes, which is by all means is an upgrade at this point. Because I mean, I love Colin Hartman. Last year he was a shell of himself. I think the injuries kind of zapped him away. I think also in a new system kind of threw him off as well. So,
all right, Freddie, which obviously we when we even talked to him, we really wished we could have seen more than 2 years, because I think he was really starting to break out of his shell.
Yes.
How can we replace Freddie's rebounding?
It's gonna have to be by committee. I think it's like kind of what I said about the linebackers, right? We don't have anybody on the team that at this moment I can go and look at with any, definitive, thought and go, yeah, that person's definitely going to be that rebounder. The guy that out rebounds Michigan State. Justin Smith's a decent rebounder and all, but he's not Freddie McSwain, because Freddie's is always going to be Freddie. He's just always going to get those freaky rebounds. So if it's anybody on the team, I think it's going to be one of the freshmen. So you're going to be looking at, a Jake Forrester most likely is going to come in and maybe take over that duty. Or maybe even our grad transfer, Evans Fitzner, is going to be the guy that's going to get because he's going to get looks at the 5s. But I don't think we're going to be able to just have one person go like, you know what, that person's going to go in the game and get us about 7 offensive and defensive rebounds.
That, and I think also Race Thompson possibly. We don't know what Race's role is going to be, because Race could be a forward where Archie's not going to want him to actively go out and get rebounds, or he could be. We're not necessarily sure yet what Race's specific role down low is going to be, but I think it's going to be a lot of that. And I think also, since Freddie had to put up a lot more minutes after Duran went down, if Duran comes back, Duran is, just by the sheer size of him, he's going to get a lot more rebounds.
Yes.
It might not be maybe those 9 offensive rebounds like Freddie had against Michigan State, but Duran is just by nature, in college, being his humongous 6'10" self, he's going to get more rebounds. And I think in simple terms, again, we could talk about this for forever, but we're already going long on our episode. It's going to be by a committee of, like you said, honestly, that narrows down to like 5 or 6 people that could be taking a lot of the stuff. And again, just like we talked about with Rob, we've got people that are going to be able to replace him. And you always never want to talk about, I guess, like replacing someone, because usually you can't ever specifically replace a player and what they're doing. But it's a good thing that we've got so many people that are going to be able to try and fill that quote unquote void that Freddie's leaving behind. And you've got a lot of people to where, say, I'm just putting this out there, let's say Jerome Hunter is a bust or something in his freshman year. You've got 3 other people that are going to try and step up behind him. So I don't think that's going to be much of a problem.
Yeah, Noah's not saying that Jerome Hunter is going to be a bust, but he's just throwing it.
Just an example. That was an example. All right. We had a Twitter question come in, and we saved our QB to the end because Respectable Adam on Twitter, great supporter of us. He really retweets and talked to us a lot on Twitter. He asked about who we like as starting QB. I texted Matt this, and all of us, we all know who's going to be the starting QB, but I don't think it's as simple as we think it is, because going through a lot of the spring camps, the Cream and Crimson game and all that stuff, Tom Allen really likes Peyton Ramsey. But basically the 3 guys now that Nick Tronti is going to transfer, is looking to transfer, is Peyton Ramsey. You've got the Mr. Football, Michael Penix Jr., and then Brandon Dawkins, the Arizona transfer that we talked about. So I know, but Matt, tell us who you like as our starting QB.
I really like Brandon Dawkins. I like what I saw of him at Arizona, and I also feel like him coming from Arizona in a West Coast offense over there for the Wildcats, I feel like coming over to IU, he'll be able to fit in real fast. I don't think it's going to be that much of a difference in style of play or different schemes and stuff like that, or reads. So he should be fine. He might not start the first, 1 or 2 games, and I think you're going to talk to more about that. But I think for the long run of the season, I think we're best suited if Brandon Dawkins steps up and takes over that starting job.
Yep, and I agree. I totally agree with Brandon Dawkins being the main quarterback. When we saw that he was transferring, the first thing I thought was, wow, we now have another good quarterback again. We've got someone that was not comparing, but we've got someone competent like Nate Sudfeld was to be able to pass the ball, get run out of situations and stuff. That was the first thing I thought of Brandon Dawkins.
It's not like Peyton Ramsey isn't a competent quarterback. Peyton Ramsey's a great quarterback, but Brandon, he has another level of experience that Peyton doesn't have, which is he's played for a even bigger football program and been the starting job and been on a winning team and been to a bowl game. This Brandon Dawkins is a starting quarterback on almost any other Division I football team other than maybe outside of the top 15, 20 programs.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for Khalil Tate going crazy last year and almost making the Heisman voting, right, he'd still be the starting quarterback at Arizona. And people had Arizona ranked in the preseason poll last year because they were so high on Brandon Dawkins himself. So we have a fantastic quarterback, and I'm excited to see him with our wide receivers group that we were just talking about, how much depth they have. It's all going to be about how fast Brandon Dawkins can get used to the wide receivers in our program and used to the offense. Because if he gets used to it as easy as I think he is, I think we're going to have a very good offense next year. Mike DeBoard meltdown beside the fact.
The only, which is what you alluded to earlier, the only scenario I don't see Brandon Dawkins just starting game 1. Again, I think the entire season, the majority of all of those games, Brandon Dawkins is going to get most of the minutes. I don't even think it's going to be like like we had last year where Lego and Ramsey started to split time and stuff. I think Brandon is going to be the main anchor just because of the guy who he is, like you just said. But I think the only reason day 1, the very first kickoff, that Brandon is not starting is just because Peyton Ramsey has been in the system before. He's played games, like you said, and he just knows the system a little better. And he did prove himself last year to some extent. That's the only reason I see Peyton starting. And I really wanted to see Michael Penix Jr., but I think it's really cool that we get to wait to see Michael Penix Jr. because I was really looking forward to, until Brandon left, seeing this really young core with Peyton, Michael, and Nick just really go at it. But I think don't turn away from Michael Penix Jr. Maybe just put him in on the afterburners, the back burners for later in his career, because this year he might not see too much time unless he kind of has like a Dak Prescott in the NFL for year one with just breaking out or something. But I think Michael might be third string QB unless he has a breakout, but don't think that for long. I
hope Michael Penix actually red shirts. So
I hope so.
Yeah, giving him an extra year of eligibility. Because I assume until Peyton Ramsey graduates that the starting job is his once Brandon Dawkins leaves, right? So once Brandon leaves, I believe that Ramsey is the heir to the IU football quarterback throne, as per se. But if Michael Penix comes through and then takes it from him, am I going to be disappointed? No, because that means he's a fantastic quarterback and is as higher rated than what people thought he was coming out of high school, which is fantastic for the football program. But I think the line of succession goes right now, which is Brandon, and then it's Peyton, and then it's Michael in third. And I hope Michael takes the year off, because then Peyton got 2 more years left. So his senior year, he'll be the backup quarterback, and then as we look into the future, his junior year, he's the starter, right? His redshirt junior year. Yeah.
Which we could talk about this for forever.
Right.
But even if he redshirts and somehow Brandon and Peyton get injured or something,
right?
It's
you can break the red.
You can break the redshirt. It's not like you do redshirt and you can't play the whole time. You might as well, if he's going to be third string QB, you might as well at least start out as a redshirt and then just maintain that to where if he happens to not play the whole snaps, any snap, throughout the entire year, then he can play an extra year, which would be awesome, because I think the quarterback position, which was once bleak about a year ago, is really looking promising in the next couple of years, especially with the potential transfer that's even better than Brandon Dawkins coming in for next year's team, which we can talk about that later. I did tweet something out. So if you don't follow us on Twitter, good wrap up right there. Follow us on Twitter, because there was a humongous kind of almost top 5 quarterback that could potentially transfer to Indiana next year. But if you want to see that, follow us on Twitter. That about wraps it up for our 40th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you all so much for joining us. Stay tuned through updates on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to YouTube. Visit us at our website, thehoosiersound.com, to find all of our information regarding our podcast. And again, when I get that new website up, if you guys could really help us out, that would be great. But I'll also let you know, because there's some really cool stuff in it. As always, send us your questions as the audience, so be sure to comment, chat, or send us a message at contact@thehoosiersound.com on what questions you have, and we'll try to get them on our next episode, just like we had Respectable Adam get in. So really, if you ask the questions, we will talk about them. But lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. It really helps so that we can grow this podcast. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.